The ship floated silently in the vast emptiness of space. Inside, the crew was busy with their usual duties. The Starwing was an old cargo ship, but it had been reliable for years. Jack was one of the officers, a curious man with a sense of adventure. He had spent most of his life traveling between distant planets, never quite finding a place he could call home. But today was different. Today they had arrived at a planet no one had ever heard of, and the signals they had picked up from the surface were unlike anything they had encountered before. The planet was covered in dense forests and high mountain ranges with barely any signs of life visible from orbit. But something was pulling them there, something Jack couldn't resist. The energy readings were too strong, and something about the way they fluctuated seemed familiar, even though he couldn't place it. The crew was on edge. They had all heard stories about strange occurrences in unexplored territories. No one knew what to expect. "Jack, are you sure this is safe?" one of the engineers, Claire, asked as she adjusted the controls. "It's just an exploration." "Mission? What could go wrong?" Jack replied, trying to sound confident, but even he wasn't sure. His gut told him there was more to this place than the readings suggested. As the ship descended through the thick atmosphere, Jack glanced out. Of the window, the forests below looked untouched, as if they had been waiting for someone. They landed near a large clearing. The air was heavy, and there was an eerie quiet. Jack grabbed his gear, ready to step out. He was excited, but he also felt an odd sense of unease. There was something strange about the planet, and it was pulling at him. "Stay alert, everyone. We don't know what we're dealing with down there," Jack said, leading the way as the crew followed him off the ship. The team was made up of experienced explorers, but even they couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. They set off into the forest. The sound of their boots crunching through the underbrush, the only noise breaking the silence. Jack led the group, his senses sharp as he scanned the area. The trees were massive, with thick branches and leaves that seemed to shimmer in the low light. Then they found her. Lyra stood in the center of a strange stone circle, her eyes closed as if she were meditating. She looked unlike anything Jack had seen before. Her skin shimmered faintly, a soft glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her breathing. She was tall, with long dark hair that cascaded down her back, and her features were both alien and beautiful. She was dressed in a simple robe that blended with the forest, but it was the heat emanating from her that caught Jack's attention. His first instinct was to reach out, to see if she was in trouble, but he stopped himself. There was something about her that made him hesitate. Her presence was powerful, yet calm, and the heat radiating from her body was both unsettling and captivating. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice gentle but firm. Lyra opened her eyes slowly, her gaze locking onto his. She didn't seem surprised to see them. Instead, her expression was one of quiet understanding. "Shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft but filled with authority. "We came to investigate," Jack replied, stepping forward slightly. "What's happening here?" "The signals we received were unusual. You should leave," she said again, her eyes narrowing as she took a step back. "It's too late." "Too late for what?" Jack asked, confused. There was something in her eyes, something deep and ancient, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, something he couldn't place. Before he could ask another question, she raised her hand. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice now sharp, a warning in her tone. Jack paused, looking at her hand, then back at her face. Her warning felt real, but why? He had no intention of touching her, yet he felt compelled to do so, as though something inside him was urging him forward. Lyra's eyes flickered with something dark, and for a moment, she seemed to lose control. The temperature around them shot up, and Jack felt a wave of intense heat wash over him. It wasn't the kind of heat that made you sweat from the sun. No, this was different. It felt like the air itself was being compressed, and the very ground beneath his feet seemed to hum with power. "What's happening?" Jack asked, taking a step back. Lyra gasped, clutching her chest as if she were struggling to breathe. The heat continued to rise, and Jack could feel it now, searing through the air, burning his skin even at a distance. The trees around them trembled as though the very earth was responding to her energy. Stay back, Lyra shouted, but it was too late. Her body was radiating heat now, too much for anyone to ignore. It wasn't just her skin that was glowing, it was as if her entire body was glowing from within. Like a star that was about to explode, Jack instinctively moved closer to her, unsure of what to do, but Lyra flinched, her voice trembling with fear. No, don't touch me. It's already too much. Her skin was glowing brighter, the heat was unbearable. When Jack could feel the pulse of energy from her body echo through the forest. The air around them shimmered like a mirage, and Jack realized something important. No, this wasn't just some alien woman. This was something far more dangerous, something ancient and untapped, something powerful. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to control the heat, but it was clear she was losing the battle. I warned you, she whispered, her voice strained as she collapsed to her knees. Her body seemed to pulse with an energy that was almost alive, and the temperature continued to rise. Jack stood frozen for a moment, unsure what to do. The heat from her body was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was overwhelming, like standing too close to a furnace. Yet something inside him pushed him forward. Couldn't leave her like this, not when she was in pain. He stepped closer, reaching out a hand to help her, but the moment his fingers brushed against her glowing skin, everything changed. The world around them exploded with light. The moment Jack's fingers made contact with Lyra's glowing skin, the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. A burst of heat rushed through him, overwhelming every sense. It wasn't just the warmth of a sun on a summer day, it was a force, a power that felt like it could burn through steel. His skin prickled, and his breath caught in his throat. He pulled back instinctively, but the heat followed him, pressing in from all sides. Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with panic. No, no, she cried, her voice breaking. She tried to pull away from him, but her body seemed to be radiating energy, like a star on the brink of exploding. Jack could see the sweat forming on her forehead as she struggled, her breathing shallow and frantic. Her body trembled, and Jack could see the strain on her face, as though she were fighting against something far too powerful for her to control. What's happening to you? Jack asked, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding before him. He stepped back, but the heat in the air didn't let up, it only seemed to intensify. I warned you, Lyra whispered, clutching her chest. I can't. I don't have control. It's too much. It's too late. Jack's eyes darted around the clearing. The trees were beginning to sway, and the ground under his feet felt hot, as if the very soil was reacting to the growing energy. He could feel the heat spreading, reaching out to the ship in the distance, even though it was far away. Raced as he tried to think of what to do. We need to get you somewhere safe, he said, moving closer, but Lyra shook her head violently. Double quotes, no, you don't understand.
Ah!
It's not just me. It's the planet. It's all connected, she muttered as if lost in a trance. Her words didn't make sense to Jack, but the urgency in her voice was undeniable. Before Jack could ask more questions, there was a sudden rumble in the distance. The ground trembled beneath their feet, sending a wave of panic through Jack's chest. He looked toward the horizon, where dark clouds were beginning to gather. Lightning crackled across the sky, and the wind started to pick up. Howling through the trees, Lyra's face paled as she stood up shakily, her hands still clenched tightly at her sides. I have to stop this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked like she was on the verge of collapsing, but she managed to take a few unsteady steps forward, her body still emitting a soft glow. What are you talking about? Jack asked, following her quickly. What do you need to do? The power is too much, Lyra replied. It's not just my body, it's the core of the planet. The heat is rising from below, and if it continues, the planet will become unstable. Jack's mind raced as the weight of her words sank in. The temperature around them was already unbearable, and if what she said was true, this place wasn't just dangerous for them, it was dangerous for everyone. We have to stop it, Jack said, determination setting into his voice. We can't let this destroy the planet. Lyra nodded weakly. I don't know how, but I can feel it. If we don't stop this now, everything will be lost. The rumbling grew louder, and the temperature rose even higher. Jack could feel his clothes sticking to his skin as he wiped sweat from his forehead. The heat was no longer just in the air, it was in the ground, in the very atmosphere around them. The trees nearby were starting to curl at the edges there, leaves singeing from the intense heat. Even the rocks beneath their feet were starting to crack. "We have to move," Jack said, taking Lyra's arm and pulling her away from the center of the stone circle. She stumbled beside him, her steps unsteady. The heat was pushing at her, but she seemed to be too exhausted to fight it anymore. "Where do we go?" Lyra asked, her voice faint. Jack glanced around, trying to think of a plan. The ship was too far to reach in time. They needed something closer, something that could help. And then Jack noticed a faint glow in the distance. Through the trees, just beyond the clearing, there was a faint light, pulsing as if it were calling. To them, it was their only chance. "Over there," Jack said, pointing toward the light. "We need to get to that." Lyra's eyes followed his gaze, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes' recognition, maybe even hope. She nodded weakly and moved toward the light, her feet dragging as she followed Jack. As they moved, the ground continued to shake beneath them. The rumbling intensified, and the sky above darkened with an unnatural storm. The wind picked up, howling like a beast, and Jack could hear the distant sounds of trees breaking under the pressure of the heat.
Ah!
It was like the planet itself was protesting, struggling against the growing power that Lyra was unknowingly releasing. They reached the glowing light, which turned out to be an ancient stone structure half hidden by the forest. The stones were covered in strange symbols, their surfaces glowing faintly in the dim light. It seemed like the energy from the planet's core was being channeled through this structure, as if it was a conduit for the heat. "What is this place?" Jack asked, his voice strained. Lyra staggered toward the stone circle, her hand reaching out as if she were drawn to it. It's ancient," she whispered. "A place of power. My ancestors built it to control the flow of energy from the planet." Jack's heart raced as he realized the importance of the place. It wasn't just a structure, it was the key to stopping the destruction. But it wasn't enough for him to understand. He needed to figure out how to activate the energy and control it before it consumed them all. "We need to activate it," Lyra said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. She turned to Jack, her face now pale and exhausted. "But I don't know how." Jack glanced at the strange symbols carved into the stones. They seemed familiar, but he couldn't make sense of them. The urgency in the air grew stronger. They had no time to waste. "We'll figure it out," Jack said, stepping forward. "We have no other choice." The ground trembled beneath Jack's feet. He could feel the air grow heavier with each passing second, as though the very atmosphere was charged with an unstoppable force. He glanced at Lyra, who stood before the stone circle, her body shaking. From the intensity of the power she was trying to control, her skin still radiated heat. And the temperature around them had become almost unbearable. Lyra's eyes were wide with fear as she glanced at the ancient symbols on the stone. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice cracking under the pressure. She had been fighting against the overwhelming power for so long, but the more she struggled, the stronger it seemed to grow. "We don't have a choice," Jack said, his voice firm. He could see the storm swirling above them, growing more violent. By the second, the air was thick with electricity, and the distant rumbling of the planet's shifting core could be heard even here in the heart of the forest. "We have to figure this out, or the planet will be gone." Lyra took a shaky breath, her hand still resting on the stone. "I've never been able to control it," she said, her eyes filled with regret. "I was trained to harness the power. But my people, they're gone. I'm the last one, Jack." Now Jack stepped closer to her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out together," he said, trying to reassure her. He had no idea how they would stop the planet from collapsing, but he refused to believe there was no way. He could feel the heat intensifying again, making his clothes stick to his skin. Sweat dripped down his forehead as the air grew more oppressive. The trees around them were starting to wither from the heat, their leaves curling and turning brown. Even the rocks under their feet seemed to be heating up, cracking from the pressure. "We need to act fast," Jack said, scanning the surroundings. His mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. The stone circle, maybe it can help. The symbols, the energy, it has to mean something. Lyra's eyes followed his gaze to the glowing symbols etched into the stones. 8. "But I don't understand them," she said, her voice filled with doubt. "I can't even control the energy within me. How am I supposed to control this?" Jack took a deep breath and placed his hand on the stone. He had no idea if this would work, but something inside him told him that it was their only chance. As soon as his fingers made contact, a pulse of energy shot through him and he could feel the heat surge through his body. His muscles tightened from the intensity, but he forced himself to stay still, to endure it. The symbols on the stone began to glow brighter, and for a moment, Jack's vision blurred. He saw flashes of strange images in his mind, shapes, colors, and patterns he didn't recognize. It was as if the stone itself was speaking to him, urging him to understand. The images faded as quickly as they appeared. But one thing was clear. The energy in this place was ancient, powerful, and it was connected to both Lyra and the planet. "I think I know what we need to do," Jack said, his voice filled with determination. He turned to Lyra, who was still trembling but watching him closely. "The stone circle is a conduit, a way to channel the power of the planet's core. But we can't do it alone. We need to work together, tap into the energy, and focus it." Lyra looked at him, her expression still uncertain. "But how?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to trust the stone, trust the power within us," Jack said. "You've been holding this power inside you for so long, and now you have to let it flow. Don't fight it, use it." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, as if considering his words. The storm above them continued to rage, the winds howling like wild animals. The ground beneath them shook again, and Jack could feel the heat from Lyra's body intensifying. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if the planet itself was on the verge of exploding. Lyra took a deep breath, and when she opened her eyes, there was a new determination in them. She stepped closer to Jack, placing her hands on the stone. Just as he had done, the moment she touched it, a surge of energy flowed through her, and the glow from the stone brightened, sending waves of heat and light into the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Lyra's body began to glow even brighter, her skin radiating more heat than before. Jack could feel the power growing, surging through the stone and into both of them. He was able to hold on, but it was becoming harder. The temperature around them was becoming unbearable, and Jack's vision began to blur from the heat. "Focus," Jack shouted over the wind and the crashing thunder. "We need to concentrate on the core, the heart of the planet, channel the power into it." Lyra's breathing was labored, but she nodded, her eyes closing as she tried to concentrate. Jack felt the stone pulse again, the energy flowing through him with such force that he feared his body might break from it. But he kept going, focused on the task at hand. The storm above them seemed to intensify, as if it was responding to the growing power between them. The wind howled louder and lightning flashed across the sky. The earth beneath their feet cracked, sending deep fissures through the ground. But still, they held on. The heat continued to rise, but Lyra's grip on the stone tightened. Her body trembled, but she didn't pull away. Jack could see the strain on her face, but there was a new strength in her eyes. She was finally letting go, finally embracing the power she had fought for so long. Suddenly, the energy in the air shifted, the ground stopped shaking, and the storm above them began to subside, and the heat, while still intense, began to stabilize. Jack could feel the power being focused, channeled into the planet's core. The stone under his hands pulsed, sending a wave of warmth through his body. But it wasn't the destructive heat it had been before. This was controlled, focused. Lyra's body stopped glowing as brightly, and the temperature around them began to drop, though it was still uncomfortably warm. She collapsed to her knees, exhausted from the effort. Jack dropped to her side, catching her before she hit the ground. "We did it," Jack said, his voice filled with relief. Lyra looked up at him, her expression softening. "We stopped it. The planet. It's safe," Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. They had done it. They had stopped the planet from collapsing. But there was no time to relax. They still had to figure out what came next. The storm had subsided, but the effects of the heat would linger, and the question remained: what would happen to Lyra now, after releasing the power she had kept inside for so long? For now, they had one, but the journey was far from over. The air around them was still heavy, but the worst of the storm had passed. The glowing symbols on the stone circle had dimmed, and the oppressive heat that had once surrounded them had lessened. Jack helped Lyra sit up, her breathing still ragged. From the effort she had put into channeling the energy, her body had returned to its normal temperature, but the toll on her was clear. Sweat covered her face, and her eyes were tired. Jack could feel her exhaustion, but there was something else, relief. "We did it," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. She looked up at him, her gaze filled with both gratitude and uncertainty. "But what now?" Jack glanced around at the landscape. The forest was still standing, though some of the trees were scorched and dying from the heat. The ground beneath them was cracked, but the worst of the damage seemed to be contained. The immediate danger had passed, but there was no denying that the planet's balance had been shaken. The storm clouds were slowly dissipating, leaving behind a sky full of dark, lingering energy. It was as if the planet was taking a deep breath, recovering from the chaos. "We've stopped the planet from collapsing. But it's not over yet," Jack said, helping Lyra to her feet. Her legs wobbled for a moment, but she steadied herself. "We need to figure out how to prevent this from happening again. You can't just keep suppressing your power forever." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know. I can feel the power inside me still pulsing, but I don't know how to control it. It's too much. My people, my ancestors, were able to harness it, but they're gone. I was never taught how to control it properly." Jack could hear the pain in her voice. She wasn't just struggling with the power inside her. She was grieving for the loss of her people, her home, and the knowledge that was now lost to time. He understood the weight of it. But they couldn't dwell on the past. They had to find a way forward. "We need to find a way to help you understand your power," Jack said firmly. "Maybe there's something else here, something hidden that could give you the answers. Your ancestors built this place, right? They must have left something behind?" Lyra's eyes brightened slightly. "Yes," she said. "There are ancient temples deep within the mountains. My people use them to commune with the energy of the planet. Maybe there's something there that could help us." Jack nodded. "And that's where we need to go. We can't stay here, not when we don't know how to stop the energy from flaring up again. Let's find those temples." With a final glance at the stone circle, Jack and Lyra began their trek through the forest. The air was still warm, but the oppressive heat from before had died down. As they moved deeper into the forest, the trees began to grow taller, their branches intertwining above them, casting long shadows over the ground. The journey was quiet, and the only sounds were the distant calls of unseen creatures and the rustling of the leaves underfoot. After hours of walking, they reached the foot of the mountains. The towering peaks rose above them, their jagged edges piercing the sky. The air was thinner here, and the temperature dropped slightly, offering a welcome relief from the heat of the past few hours. "There are caves deep within the mountains," Lyra said, pointing to a narrow pass between two massive rocks. "The temples are hidden there. It's a dangerous place, but if we can find the entrance, we might be able to find what we need." Jack glanced at her, his face serious. "Dangerous how?" Lyra hesitated. "The caves are unstable. The energy from the core of the planet flows through them, and some of the tunnels have collapsed over the centuries. There are also that guard the temples. People used to communicate with them, but without the proper knowledge, we might be seen as intruders." Jack's grip tightened on his weapon. Wasn't sure what kind of creatures they might encounter, but if they were anything like the planet's violent storms, he was ready for anything. "We'll be careful. Let's move." They climbed through the rocky pass, careful to avoid loose stones that threatened to give way beneath their feet. As they moved deeper into the mountains, the air grew cooler, and the ground became uneven. The silence was oppressive, broken only by their footsteps and the occasional crackle of energy in the distance. The further they went, the more Jack felt the weight of the planet's power pressing down on them. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the entrance to a massive cave system. The entrance was marked by a series of carved symbols, identical to those on the stone circle. The symbols glowed faintly, casting an eerie light over the cave's dark interior. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice filled with a mix of awe and apprehension. "The entrance to the temple." Jack nodded. "Let's go. But stay close." They entered the cave, and the temperature dropped even further. The walls of the cave were lined with strange carvings, depicting scenes of alien creatures and ancient beings. The air smelled of stone and earth, and the deeper they went, the more they could feel the hum of energy in the walls. It was as if the planet's life force was flowing through the caves, pulsing in rhythm with their own heartbeats. As they walked, Jack noticed that the cave floor was uneven, with deep cracks running along its surface. He had to step carefully to avoid falling into the gaps. The walls were slick with moisture, and the further they went, the darker it became. Jack pulled out a small light, illuminating the path ahead. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook again, and the cave walls reverberated with a deep, rumbling sound. Jack stopped in his tracks, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. "What was that?" Lyra asked, her voice tight with fear. "I don't know," Jack said, his eyes scanning. "The darkness. Stay close." The rumbling grew louder, and then from the darkness ahead a low growl echoed through the cave. Jack's heart raced as the sound grew closer. Something was moving in the shadows, and whatever it wasn't friendly. "We need to move," Jack said, grabbing Lyra's arm and pulling her forward. Fast, they ran deeper into the cave, the growl of the creature following them. As they rounded a corner, they saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at them from the shadows. The creature that guarded the temple had found them. The deep growl echoed through the cave, sending a chill down Jack's spine. He could hear the creature moving in the shadows, its footsteps echoing against the rocky walls. It was getting closer, its eyes glowing like two burning embers in the darkness. Jack's grip tightened on his weapon, but his mind raced for a plan. Whatever it was, they couldn't let it stop them now. They had come too far to turn back. "Lyra, stay behind me," Jack said, his voice low but firm. Lyra, her face pale with fear, nodded without question. She stayed close to Jack, her eyes wide as she looked into the dark depths of the cave. Growl grew louder, and Jack's senses were on high alert. Every instinct in him screamed to be ready for anything. He could feel the heat still radiating from Lyra's body, the energy still pulsing inside her, but she seemed to have little control over it now. It was as if the cave itself was reacting to her power. Suddenly, the creature emerged from the shadows. It was massive, with sharp, jagged features and a sleek, muscular body. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, and it bared its teeth, revealing rows of deadly fangs. Jack took a step forward, ready to defend himself and Lyra, but he didn't want to risk killing it at least. Not yet. They needed to understand what it was, what it wanted. The creature's growl rumbled in the air as it moved closer, its massive form blocking the narrow path ahead. Jack raised his weapon, aiming for the creature's chest, but he held back from firing. The last thing they needed was to make it angrier. Then, to his surprise, the creature spoke. Its voice was deep, like the sound of a distant thunderstorm, and it seemed to reverberate through the cave. "Why have you come here?" it asked, its glowing eyes narrowing. Jack hesitated. He'd been expecting an attack, but this was something different. The creature was ... speaking. It was a protector, not an enemy. "We're searching for answers," Jack said cautiously. Lowering his weapon slightly, "We need to find the temple. We need to help her." The creature's eyes shifted to Lyra, who was standing close behind Jack, her face still pale and full of uncertainty. The creature seemed to study her for a moment before it spoke again. "She is the last of her kind," it said, its voice softer now. "The power within her is ancient, and it can destroy the world or it can save it. The choice is hers. Lyra's heart raced in her chest as the creature's words sank in. "I never asked for this power," she whispered, her voice filled with both fear and sadness. "I don't know how to control it. I don't want to destroy everything." The creature took a step closer, its eyes locking onto hers. "You are not alone in this. The energy that flows through you has a purpose. Your ancestors harnessed this power to protect the planet, to keep balance. But without understanding, without guidance, the power can be dangerous." Jack stepped forward, his voice steady but urgent. "Then teach her. Show her how to control it. We've already seen what happens when it gets out of control. We need help. She needs help." "Ouch!" The creature's gaze softened slightly, and it stepped back, allowing them to pass. "I will guide you, but it is not I who can show her how to use this power. It is the temple deep within the cave. Only there will you find the answers you seek." Lyra looked at Jack, her eyes filled with uncertainty. What if I can't do it? What if I can't control it? What if it destroys everything? Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've already done the impossible, Lyra. You stopped the planet from collapsing. You can control it. You just need to believe in yourself. We'll do it together." Lyra took a deep breath, nodding slowly. She wasn't sure if she believed in herself, but Jack's words gave her a glimmer of hope. She had to try. There was no other choice. With the creature stepping aside, Jack and Lyra moved past it, deeper into the cave. The path narrowed, the walls of the cave pressing in on them from both sides. The further they went, the more they could feel the power in the air. The energy from the core of the planet pulsing through the very ground they walked on. Finally, they reached the heart of the cave, a massive chamber filled with ancient stone. Pillars. The walls were covered in more glowing symbols, their light flickering like stars. At the center of the chamber stood a tall stone altar surrounded by more symbols. The power in the room was palpable, like the air itself was charged with energy. It was the temple, the place Lyra had spoken of. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice full of awe. "The temple of my ancestors." Jack looked around, taking in the sight of the ancient ruins. He could feel the energy surging in the room, growing stronger the closer they got to the altar. It was as if the very stones were alive, waiting for something or someone to awaken them. Lyra stepped forward, her heart racing. She could feel the energy pulsing within her, as if it were calling to her, but she didn't know how to answer it. She didn't know how to control it. The creature's voice echoed through the chamber. "Place your hands on the altar. It said your ancestors did it to connect with the energy. You must do the same." Lyra hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked up to the altar. Her hands shook as she reached out, and she placed them gently on the stone. The moment her hands touched it, the energy in the room surged. The symbols on the walls glowed brightly, and the power flowing through her body intensified. It was almost too much to bear. She felt as if she was being pulled in every direction, the energy inside her threatening to break free. But then, something shifted. She focused, trying to calm the storm within her. The power was hers to control. She had to believe that. Jack watched anxiously as Lyra stood there, her body glowing faintly with the energy. He could see the struggle in her face, but he also saw the determination. She was learning to control it. Slowly, the power began to settle. The heat around them began to stabilize, and the energy in the room calmed. Lyra let out a shaky breath, her hands still resting on the altar. "It's working," she whispered, amazed. "I can feel it. I'm controlling it." Jack smiled, relief washing over him. They had made it this far, and now, with the power under control, they had a chance to stop the planet from collapsing for good. The air in the temple was still, the energy that had once been chaotic, now calm and steady. Lyra stood in front of the stone altar, her hands still resting lightly on the surface. Her breathing had slowed, and the power within her felt more controlled than ever before. She could feel it humming beneath her skin, alive, but no longer threatening to escape. The overwhelming heat was gone, replaced by a steady warmth. Like the first rays of the morning sun after a long night, Jack watched her closely, his face filled with concern, but also relief. They had come so far, and now, standing in the heart of the ancient temple, Lyra had finally learned how to control the power inside her. But Jack knew there was still one final step, one more choice for Lyra to make. "What happens now?" Lyra whispered, looking up at the glowing symbols on the walls, her voice filled with awe. "What do I do with this power?" Jack stepped closer to her, his voice gentle but firm. "You've done it. You've learned to control it. The question now is, what will you do with it? This power, it can either destroy or protect. You've already saved the planet once. Can you keep it under control? Okay, can you protect it? Or will the energy become too much again?" Lyra's gaze shifted to the stone altar, her fingers still lightly resting on it. She could feel the weight of Jack's words settling into her heart. She had always feared this power, had always tried to suppress it, but now, standing here in the temple, she understood that this power was not something she could hide from. It was a part of her. And, like it or not, it was a part of the planet as well. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly, her voice filled with doubt. "What if I fail? What if the power gets out of control again?" Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "You don't have to do this alone, Lyra. We're in this together. You've already proven that you can control the power. And now, we have to figure out how to make sure it never gets out of control again. The planet needs you, Lyra. You're the only one who can protect it." Lyra looked into his eyes, and for the first time since they had arrived on this strange planet, she felt a sense of peace settle within her. The power was no longer something to fear. It was something to understand, and with Jack's help, she knew she could protect the planet. She had to. "I understand," she whispered, her voice steady now. "But how? How do I use this power to protect the planet?" Jack smiled, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out. Together. You're not alone in this." Lyra's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and determination. She had always thought of herself as an outsider, a lone survivor of a people long gone. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the energy of her ancestors, she realized that she was not alone. She had Jack by her side. And together, they could do anything. Just as Lyra was about to speak again, the ground beneath them suddenly shook. The temple rumbled, its ancient stones creaking under the pressure. Jack instinctively reached for his weapon, but Lyra stopped him with a quick gesture. "It's the planet," she said, her eyes wide with concern. "The energy... it's reacting to me." The walls of the temple seemed to vibrate with the intensity of the power flowing through them. Lyra could feel it in her bones, a pulsing wave of energy from the core of the planet trying to surge to the surface. She had learned to control it, but the planet itself was reacting to her presence. It was like the heart of the world was beating. Faster, and with every beat, the ground shook. "I have to stop this," Lyra said, her voice filled with urgency. "I can feel it. The energy is building again. I need to control it before it overwhelms me." Jack stepped forward, his eyes filled with determination. "You've got this, Lyra. I believe in you." Lyra nodded, her hands gripping the stone altar as she focused on the energy pulsing beneath her skin. She closed her eyes, reaching deep within herself to calm the storm of power inside. The energy was wild, unpredictable, but she had learned its rhythm, its pulse. And now, she would learn to control it completely. The air around her shimmered as she focused, her body glowing faintly with the power flowing through her. She could feel the heat rising, but instead of letting it overwhelm her, she channeled it, directing it back into the earth. She pushed the energy deeper into the planet, like roots digging into the soil, grounding it. The shaking of the temple slowed, and the rumbling beneath their feet began to subside. For a moment it felt as if the entire world had stopped. The ground grew still, the air grew calm, and the storm above them faded into nothing. Lyra opened her eyes, and Jack could see the relief in her face. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with exhaustion but also pride. "The power is under control?" Jack smiled, his eyes filled with admiration. "You did it, Lyra? You saved the planet?" Lyra took a deep breath, the weight of everything they had been through settling on her shoulders. The power inside her was still there, but it was no longer something to fear. It was a part of her, and she had learned to control it. The planet's energy was in balance again, and with that, she had a new purpose to protect it as they stood. There, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, Jack turned to her with a look of determination. "What now?" he asked. Lyra looked around the temple, her eyes softening. "Now, we protect it. We make sure the planet stays in balance. My people may be gone, but I am here. I will honor their legacy." Jack nodded. He could see that fire in her eyes, the strength that had always been there, hidden beneath her fears. She wasn't just the last of her people. She was a protector, a guardian of the planet's energy. Together, they would ensure that the power never again threatened to destroy what they had fought so hard to protect. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Lyra felt ready to face whatever came next. She had found her purpose she would protect the planet at all costs.